Fantasy fans, as always, I'm Shay from the channel Zachary Shay, narrator of The Gallant by Janny Words, an avid fantasy and sci-fi fan, and today I'm going to be talking about what I read in the month of June. Now, usually I pair my previous month's wrap-up with the forthcoming month's TBR. This time I split it into two videos. This will be coming out Tuesday, and then the TBR video will be coming out Wednesday, I hope, if I'm punctual. And that's mainly because the month of June got away from me and I ended up reading a lot of stuff, more than I planned. So I just, I didn't want to tax myself trying to record it all in one go. It's a plethora of fantasy novels, some classical fiction, some contemporary, and some comic books and manga. Yeah, we're just going to get into it. And the first thing I read this month this is a holdover from last month, and that is Henry V by Dan Jones, The Astonishing Rise of Britain's Greatest Warrior King. This is such an interesting book. So it tells sort of the entire life of King Henry V, not just his kingship, but it actually makes a concerted effort in acknowledging and displaying the adolescence and young childhood of Henry V before he takes the throne. And, you see the layers of, his father being a usurper and how Richard II's reign affected Henry, and the tumultuous relationship he has with his fathers and the expectations put on him. And this is a very different Henry than the Hal we get in King Henry V, or even the Henry IV plays by William Shakespeare. It paints a very different picture of Hal, of Henry. And I really love this. This was a 5-star read for me. It's my first history book I've ever read. And yeah, it completely blew me away, completely wowed me. 5 out of 5 stars. And then next up, I read a comic book, Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth. This is by Grant Morrison. This took a very dark and dastardly approach to the Dark Knight mythos, to the Batman mythos, the Caped Crusaders mythos, legendarium, if you will, but not in the way that like a Frank Miller or Alan Moore does it, in a way that, in my opinion, I love everything by Alan Moore, but his Killing Joke to me was just morbid, dark, and cruel. This is not cruel. This actually shows a lot of humanity in the different foes and adversaries Bruce goes up against, Two-Face, Joker, Killer Croc, many others, and shows the humanity and how much anguish they are in, because they don't want to be these monsters. They don't want to have something wrong with them. And it just shows it's a very short story, shows a lot of humanity for the rogues gallery of Batman. And I definitely, very dark and poetic, and fans of Lewis Carroll will find a lot of homages to Alice in Wonderland. So next up, I read and adored I Who Have Never Known Men. When I read this, I gave it a 4-star. Since then, I'm wondering if it should have been a 5, but I'm going to stick with 4 because I actually had a lot of 5s this month. I'm worried I'm becoming a 5-star Strumpet. For fans of the road, which I am notoriously a road hater, but I do like the idea of someone surviving an apocalypse and constantly searching for that meaning to go on and for that hope. Funnily enough, I actually think that this works a lot better as a survival story than The Road does. You follow this main character, she's called The Child, as she's in this bunker full of women, and spoiler alert, there does come a time where they do leave the bunker, and you follow this young girl as she searches for a purpose to live on. I Who Have Never Known Men, there are no men in this story. Well, there's pretty much no men in this story, so there is no chance for reproduction. There is no, aside from the lack of men, the main character actually never developed her sexual organs. She's never had a period. She does not ovulate, so she does not have a legacy to leave on as herself. She will never give birth to a child. She'll never leave a generation to follow her, and she is the youngest of her current generation of the women who live in this bunker. So it's like, what does she have left to live for if there's nothing to come after her? And then I read Lord and King by P.L. Stewart. beautiful book. This is my favorite book so far in the Drowned Kingdom saga by P.L. Stewart. I loved Drowned Kingdom and Last of the Atlanteans, but Lord and King is even better. It is a brilliant story. It's beautiful. You follow kind of a day in the life of King Othrune and how he rules, and it doesn't just go on to the next conflict from Last of the Atlanteans. It really asks you to sit with Othrune and examine who he is as a man, as a follower of his faith, and as a king, as a husband, as a friend, as a cousin. You know, it examines the many different facets of who Othrune is to astonishing success. This is my favorite book in the series. Not only that, it elevated the series to something I would consider a must-read fantasy series. My friend Jake said the same thing. Lord and King made this must-read fantasy. And what I love about this series is each book within the Drowned Kingdom saga so far has felt very distinct. You know, it has that Malazan aspect, that Wars of Light and Shadow aspect, where you can look at each book in the series and be like, oh, this is the book that does this. This is the book that does that. It doesn't just feel like one drawn out story over 7 books. It feels like a longer story, but each book feels complete in and of itself. Next up, I read Lobster Johnson. This is from the Hellboy universe, Omnibus Volume 2. Didn't really care for it. I think I gave it a 2-star. Anyway, onward. I read If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. So this I'd heard was like The Secret History by Donna Tartt, but with Shakespeare instead of ancient Greek. And having read them both, spoiler alert, I'm going to cover The Secret History here soon, I could say that that's somewhat true. The friend groups in here feel very similar, but I actually adore If We Were Villains. I do not think it is bargain brand The Secret History. I think it's a brilliant book. I gave it 5 stars. I'm a huge Shakespeare enthusiast, so of course I'd love it, but I thought the characters in here were amazing. Oliver, James, Richard, Meredith. Like there's just so many great characters. I actually think there's not a single weak character in this cast, which is not, I could not say the same for The Secret History. There's one character in The Secret History, Francis, that I don't think is the most interesting. Whereas every member of this 4th year drama school at Delacour, they all have so much character to them and they're so electrifying to read about. I absolutely adored If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. And then I read Xmen, The Uncanny X-Men by Chris Claremont, Omnibus Volume 2, and Xmen God Loves, Man Kills by Chris Claremont as well. So I really loved this second omnibus. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it, you know, showed a very human aspect, the different mutants that fight for humanity, even though it hates and fears them. Loved the X-Men, loved its exploration of civil rights and other issues. But then I read what is, you know, the most critically acclaimed X-Men comic, and that is from the same era, but it's not part of the main X-Men run, and that's God Love, Man Kills. This was a little too on the nose. And maybe I read it too close to reading the other X-Men comics, but it just felt a little didactic in its storytelling, even though the themes are something that I definitely resonate with and agree with. I just didn't find it to be that enjoyable. And then I read 2 works, one by each of the 2 most beloved Russian literary voices. I read The Death of Ivan Ilyak by Leo Tolstoy and Poor Folk by Dostoevsky. And I'll say this, I definitely think I prefer the voice of Dostoevsky more. There's a lot more, you know, Tolstoy, I think, is known for his examination of class, whereas Dostoevsky is, you know, he evokes a deep pathos for the human experience, and that's where they differ. I think Death of Ivan Ilyak actually accomplished creating a lot of pathos for this character, Ivan Ilyak, and this is probably one of his least political works. But Poor Folk, man, I mean, it's a collection of letters between this woman, Varvara, and a man that's in love with her. I'm blanking on his name. Anyway, and it's just such a beautiful story. I gave Poor Folk a 4 stars, and I gave Death of Ivan Ilyak a 3 stars. And then I read Sin and Sorrow, the 3rd book in the City of Sacrifice by Michael R. Fletcher. This is part of the same universe as his Manifest Illusions and his Obsidian Path series, or the same multiverse. It was good, probably the best conclusion to one of his trilogies. I think I gave it a 3.5 or a 4 star. Fun, enjoyable read. If you love self-pub grimdark, definitely check it out. And then I read Hellboy Universe, The Secret History. Oh man, the alien who came to visit and why he stayed, something like that, was brilliant. And Sledgehammer 44 were brilliant. Both were very thematic and had a lot of depth to them and were some of the best stories I've ever read in Hellboy. And then the Rasputin short story was just like fine. And I read Swamp Thing Green Hell. This was a ton of fun. This is Jeff Lemire. I love the character of Swamp Thing, namely his Alan Moore run, the most famous Swamp Thing run. And this, is post-apocalyptic. It felt a lot like Wonder Woman Dead Earth by Daniel Warren Johnson. Really examined who this character is when you take him out of the main DC canon continuity and put him in this post-apocalyptic world, and it was beautiful. Yeah, absolutely loved it. And then I read a collection of Hellboy stuff. I read the Kid Hellboy stuff, which was fine. I read BPRD 1946 to 1948. 47 I thought was really, really good. And 47 had a sequel called BPRD Vampire, which is from the same people that brought us Day Tripper, which is a very literary comic book. That was excellent as well. Gave that 5 stars. And then I read a comic book called Superman Kryptonite, written by Darwin Cook and drawn by Tim Sale. And, a lot of people talk about the Tim Sale Superman book with Jeff Loeb, Superman for All Seasons. And it could be that was just super hyped, whereas this, I hadn't really heard a lot about it, so I went in with lower expectations. I actually preferred this over For All Seasons, but I'm the only one who thinks that. I gave this 5 stars. Loved Superman in that. And then we're getting to quite possibly my favorite books of the year. And The Secret History by Donna Tartt is absolutely brilliant. I've never read a book about characters I despise this much and love the story. Everyone from Henry Winter to Bunny to Richard Papin to Julian. Oh, Julian is such a magnifying presence. I did say Francis is kind of lackluster, but that's only when compared to, Charles and Camilla. And there's so many layers to this book. This is definitely one I want to reread. There's a reason that this is the most respected dark academia novel of all time. It is magnificent. I adored it. And then I read this as a buddy read with my friend Jake from Nerd Level Rising. I read No Life Forsaken, second book in the Witness series by Steven Erikson. Love this book. It was awesome. It was so great to be back in the world of Malazan. There were a lot of homages to the Carcana series, which was a lot of fun. And I didn't think it was as strong of a book as The God Is Not Willing, but I think just the joy of being back in an Erikson world, I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. There's a lot to love here if you're a Malazan fan. Though, much like Dust of Dreams, it does feel like half of a story, which I don't think that's a bad thing. I think Dust of Dreams is inappropriately hated. I think that's one of the best books of Book of the Fallen. And I'm looking forward to Witness Book 3 when it comes out. And then I read Normal People by Sally Rooney. This was excellent. I gave this 4 stars. I was going back and forth between 4 and 5, but as I've said, I've been a 5-star Strumpet this month. I've been giving a lot of stuff 5 stars. This was delightful, even though it was so sad. The way Connell treats Marianne is infuriating. It's more than just a lack of communication. Like there is a lack of the reciprocity. Her respect for Connell, Marianne's respect for Connell, is not entirely reciprocated. He may love her, but he doesn't respect her in the way she respects him. That being said, I do really enjoy the journey of Connell and Marianne both individually as people. Their relationship is a complete hot mess and should not be shipped. If you came away from this thinking, oh, I wish they could have figured it out, I think you're taking the wrong message from here. I mean, Sally Rooney, she knows what the message actually is. I'm just conjecturing here, but yeah, I don't think that they should have been together, because I don't think there would have been this lack of respect if that were the case. So it's not a matter of just sticking it out and trying to make it work. It's that there should have been mutual respect here. But I do love both of their coming of age journeys. And then this is a recommendation by my friend Philip from Philip Chase, Dr. Philip Chase. And this is the Saga of the Volsungs, which went on to inspire the works of Tolkien. I believe the works King of Elfland's Daughter took inspiration from this. I'm not sure, but there's a lot of older fantasy works that, took a lot from the Volsung Saga, much like they did Beowulf. And I love this. I thought there was a lot more depth to this than Beowulf. It's not just about Sigurd going to kill a dragon. It is about a sort of familial, generational curse on this family as they just continue to try to get vengeance for different wrongs done upon them, and what that vengeance has wrought for each of them is devastating. I read volumes 4 and 5 of The Blade Immortal. These are really good. I like The Blade Immortal quite a bit. I think it's a better Vagabond. I don't think the art's as good as, well, I don't know. The art has its own appeal to it. But, you know, if you're looking for a samurai story that's very similar to Berserk, I would recommend Blade of the Immortal. It's not as dark as Berserk, but it's pretty dark. And then I read Frankenstein Underground by Mike Mignola. This is part of the Hellboy universe. Really enjoyed it. The Frankenstein in this story is literally plucked straight from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Ton of fun. Then I read The Amazing Screw-On Head by Mike Mignola, and these are a bunch of stories he made with his daughter. And this is an in-world book in the world of Hellboy, but it's not necessarily within the same continuity. Ton of fun. Screw-On Head is an agent for Abraham Lincoln to take out Dr. Zombie. Just the type of stuff that you could imagine you'd be writing a story with your young child. And I could just imagine Mike Mignola's daughter saying, and then this happened, and then that happened. And, you know, it's a childlike wonder brought to life by Mike Mignola's excellent art, an absolute joy to read. So I'd already read Black Widow, and it was excellent. I gave it 5 stars. And then I read Mark Waid and Chris Samnee's Captain America. It was terrible. I gave it 1 star. It was the worst thing I read this month. It was really bad. Samnee's art was amazing. The story just didn't make any sense. Did not enjoy it. Moving forward, I read The Bones of Giants. It's a Hellboy story that incorporates a lot of Nordic myth. It was a ton of fun. You can tell Mike Mignola, as usual, did a lot of research into the different folklore he's referencing, and it made for a very fun story. And then I read BPRD Being Human. This one was beautiful. We got a little glimpse into each of our BPRD members: Abe Sapien, Liz Sherman, Hellboy, Johann Kraus. And you just kind of see what makes them tick a little bit. And then possibly one of my favorite fantasy novels of all time, I blasted through this book. We have Peril's Gate, book 6 in the Wars of Light and Shadow, book 3 in the Alliance of Light Center series within the Wars of Light and Shadow. Oh man, this perfectly displayed the strength of Arathon's character and gave me a better understanding of who Arathon is and what this world is and what the themes Janny's going for is. There's a section that takes up the last 3 chapters of this book. I'm just going to call it Kiwar's Maze. If you know, you know. It's a segment that I think will stand out in most people's minds, like the famous segments from Sun Eater and Disquiet Gods. I think that this is on par with that in terms of, like, when I think of the series, I think of this segment. Since I've read it, I'm now, you know, blasting through the next book in the series, but I still think of this segment pretty much every day since I've read it. It was just masterfully done. All right, and then I'm going to put these up, and then I'm going to talk about what I'm currently reading. So I'm currently reading Trader's Knot, Book 4 in Alliance of Light, or Book 7 in Wars of Light and Shadow. So this is the follow-up to Peril's Gate. And yeah, my goal has been to read 2 Janny Words chapters a day until I'm caught up on her series. Or I'm basically trying to get through Book 9 by the time I go back to school, because Books 10 and 11 have audiobooks, and that's a lot easier for me to get through while I'm in school. Nursing school is very draining. And then I'm listening on audiobook to The Girl in the Stars. This is book 1 in the Book of Ice trilogy by Mark Lawrence. Loving it so far. I'm almost done. Got about 10 hours left of the audiobook of a 40-hour audiobook of The Mirror and the Light, book 3 in the Wolf Hall trilogy, which follows the exploits of Thomas Cromwell as he makes himself an indispensable member of King Henry VIII's court, and the fallout of Henry, you know, having as many wives and, you know, killing Anne of Boleyn and all that stuff. It's fascinating, and the voice that Hilary Mantel implements in this work is astounding. It's brilliant. Go read it. Love it. I'm reading While Darkness Gathers, which is a very fun book to read in between these spurts of Janny Wirtz' stuff, because it's, you know, the chapters are really short, the characters are so much fun, they're vibrant, they're a lot younger than the cast of characters from Philip Chase's previous series, and it makes for a very, like, fun, electrifying, I won't say YA, because it's definitely not. The themes in here and the subject matter is, you know, just as adult as the Adan trilogy, but because we have this younger cast, it gives it a feeling of wonder, and the chapters are brief and the story feels so lean. I'm loving this story so much. And then I'm also reading, this is the one I'm kind of reading on my phone, you know, if I'm out in public and I didn't bring a book with me, I'll chip away a little bit at Kings of Paradise. I've been chipping away at this all month. Loving this. Ruka, son of Bela, is such an interesting character, and I'm even enjoying the other character, Kale, which most fans are not as keen on as they are on Ruka. But Ruka is the standout, of course. Yeah, so that's what I'm currently reading. Let me know down in the comment section below what you read in the month of June. And yeah, as always, stay safe, guys. Peace.